So Mama Ponya Motsai, who is the CEO of Frey College, is going to be moderating this session. And we'll be hearing from Slindile Kanyile, co-founder of Lekanyile Media Group, Asha Mwilu, who's the founder of Debunk Media, and Tun Okowale Sonaya, who's the co-founder and CEO of Women Radio 91.7 Nigeria. Thank you so much, colleagues, and over to you, Mama Ponya. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bongiwe. And hello to everybody. It's such an honor to be here with everybody and an honor to be leading this panel, which I'm very, very excited to be the one to kind of navigate us through this very important panel, which, as Bongiwe said, is titled Women Media Owners Overcoming Challenges. And in many ways, really, this will bring together a lot of what has been touched on already and what will be touched on in the coming sessions. And really the aim of this session is that we can have women who have successfully launched their businesses in media, news media in particular, and they can share their experiences and they can share some tips in practical things that after you leave this session, after you leave this, the whole day, you really have knowledge with you that can help you practically to run a more sustainable and more successful business. Often when I see those lists of the most difficult businesses to start, and things like restaurants would be there and whatnot to start and sustain, I'm always like, why is news media not on this? Because news media is one of the most difficult businesses or organizations you can start for many reasons, and we know what's happening. We know the impact of technology on news media. We know, if you are a woman, there's multiple factors that come into how successful or the challenges that you will face. We know about financial sustainability, trying to understand our audiences now as their behavior changes. So there's many factors that really impact news media. So to the women who have done it, who have been brave enough to do it, Paula mentioned in the beginning when she was doing her session that courage is not about not being afraid, but it's being afraid, seeing the challenges and doing it anyway. And to those who have done it and are doing well, we honor those like our panelists, and we are eager to learn from them. And so this is really what the session aims to do. We'll touch on the core issues we'll touch on include building impactful businesses, fundraising, dealing with burnout, dealing with bias. We'll come back to the issues of the imposter syndrome that Kathy spoke about, and really just speak practically about what it is to really run a media business and overcome those challenges. And we are honored to have these amazing women that I'm going to introduce just now join us. And before I introduce our speakers and our panelists, I want to ask from our participants, please, as we go along, please write questions in the chat, write questions, write comments. We have about 90 minutes and we really want this to be as engaging as possible. We're going to go through your questions as we go along the session. We're not going to wait until the end. So even if you don't have a question, but you have a comment, because we also want to learn from you, over 30 of the women who registered for this seminar are already media entrepreneurs. So we also want to hear your journey. And another 30 said that they were thinking and they want to start a media organization. So we really want to engage and not have this be a one-way thing. So please do write your questions and comments in the chat as we go along, and I will be dipping in and out of those as I ask our panelists questions. I'll also include in the questions some of the questions that you guys and the other participants shared in the questionnaire that Bongi was sent before this session. And so without saying too much, I'm going to start, and I'm going to start by introducing our panel members. I'll start with Asha. Asha Ahmed Muulu is the founder of Debunk Media, which is an independent multimedia company which covers people, politics, and pop culture out of East Africa. Asha spent more than a decade weaving intricate stories of people and their relationships to power through reporting, investigations, and documentary filmmaking. Her more notable work includes her reporting on Al-Shabaab's terror grip in East Africa. She also reported on Nelson Mandela's final days and death. She's reported on official corruption in Kenya, extrajudicial killings in Kenya's urban towns, as well as the intersection of public debt and public policy. For her reporting on Al-Shabaab activities in Kenya and Kenya-Somalia border, in the Kenya-Somalia border, Asha was named the 2016 CNN Multi-Choice Africa Journalist of the Year. So a lot of expertise and a lot of experiences that Asha will bring to this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, Asha. And then we also have Slindile Kanyile. Slindile is a versatile journalist and editor and co-founder and CEO of Likanyile Group, which publishes Umbele, an award-winning isiZulu financial publication, and Ukhanyisi, a Zulu medium digital education publication, which is distributed via WhatsApp. She has more than 25 years experience in legacy and new media organizations. Slindile previously served as the editor of Isolwezi, and for those of you who are not familiar, Isolwezi is the biggest Zulu newspaper in the country and is a former deputy editor of Daily News. She is the chairperson of the South African National Editors Forum's Media Freedom Subcommittee, and she also chairs the Durban University of Technology Journalism Advisory Board. She also serves as a member of AIP and ARB boards. Slindile, we are so delighted to have you. Thank you for joining us, and we're excited to hear from you. And then the last member, last but not least, of our panel is Tuan Okewele Sonaiya, and she is a tribalizing media entrepreneur, renowned broadcaster, and passionate advocate for women's empowerment. Tuan has over 30 years of experience in broadcasting journalism, media management, all across Africa and the United Kingdom. She is widely recognized as a leading voice in strategic communications, public engagement, and inclusive governance. She is the co-founder and the chief executive officer of Women Radio 91.7 FM, which is Nigeria's only radio station dedicated to women and families, and it is Africa's only female-centric commercial radio station. Lovely to have you with us, Ton, and thank you for joining us. We're excited to hear from you and all these experiences that we have. And just to start us off, I want to give the floor to our speakers as a way of introducing themselves and actually as a way of helping us, everything that you're going to speak about, helping us position it accurately, if you can just start in your opening remarks, if you can just tell us a little bit about why you started the platform that you started, the publication that you started, what was burning in you, and why you thought that given what you knew about how hard it is to sustain a news media organization, why you still went ahead and did it anyway, and the kind of impact that you were hoping to have. And I will start with Asha, and I'll start with you, Asha, because you started Debunk Media during COVID, when most publications were closing down, and it was very gloom for news media generally across Africa and the world. But yet you were brave enough to say, actually, this is the time to start something new. So Asha, can you just tell us a little bit about why that was, and the impact you are hoping for?
Hi, Mama Ponya. Thanks for your question, and hello to everyone. Thank you for having me on this panel. My fellow panelists, my colleagues, I hope you're doing well, and thanks for speaking alongside the rest of us. So I think, to answer your question, there is a misconception actually that I was brave enough to look at the world in the middle of a pandemic and start Debunk Media. It actually happened coincidentally because I had already quit my job and had already planned to start Debunk Media. And then 1 week till my final week in the newsroom, COVID hit the world. And so I had to make a decision. Do I continue with launching Debunk, or do I, stay back in the newsroom? So maybe to take you back a little bit, I had spent more than 10 years already. By the time I was launching Debunk, I'd spent more than 10 years working as a storyteller, because at the core, that's what I am. I love journalism. I love telling stories. I'm really motivated by the quest for justice, the quest for equality, the quest for dignifying all human beings. And so those 10 years in my 20s, I mean, if you look at the photo used in that profile, I look much younger than I do today. I guess the 5 years of trying this entrepreneurship journey is you can see it really showing on my face. But those early years, those 10 years of my 20s and early 30s, I spent them literally hitting the streets and telling very difficult stories. And while I was doing that, that's the only thing I wanted to do. I never had plans to start a media company. I never had plans to be an entrepreneur. I didn't even want to start a business. However, I was getting very uncomfortable in the newsrooms where I was working. So I worked at Standard Group in Kenya, as well as Royal Media Services. These are two among 3 top publishers in Kenya. Very highly resourced at the time. They had the manpower, the resources to cover all the stories, not just in Kenya, but across the region. And that's why you could see that they could send me even, for example, to South Africa when Nelson Mandela was ailing to cover that event. However, maybe towards the years of 2012, 2013, I was growing very uncomfortable, noticing the digital trends and seeing how slow our newsrooms were reacting to these developments. I mean, for example, I would cover this, I would produce these long form documentaries, 30 minutes, an hour long. They would run on television, because I'm a TV journalist by training and also by practice. And the next morning, I know that my peers have not watched it on TV. And I would ask the digital desk, do you have this video up on YouTube? And they didn't have it. That was just like one very small example. And then as we approached the 2013, 2014s, we are now noticing trends in our newsroom where budgets are being cut. I at that time now had become an editor. I was working in the special projects and investigation desks. And as we all know, those are very demanding desks in terms of resources. And our budgets were being cut completely, and we were being sent into the general news desks. So I could no longer do investigations. I could no longer respond to stories that needed a lot of care, a lot of time, a lot of critical input. I could no longer do specialist reporting. Whenever, for example, a crisis emerged, for example, in Somalia. As you all know, terrorism was a big story in between 2011 and 2020 in Kenya. And we would want to be deployed to cover, for example, in 2013, when terrorists went into Westgate Mall, we wanted to cover that story. I wanted to investigate the reasons behind this group of people coming in and getting so armed and then attacking a mall in the central area of the capital. But the newsroom did not have resources. They couldn't dedicate money to send our teams there. And what would happen is that we would have to be embedded with the Kenyan military. If you wanted to gain access to Somalia, that was literally the only way you could cover that story. And so that was like the growing frustration. So I could give a number of examples for that, but I know we don't have time. But in the end, I started now thinking that perhaps some of us who are the storytellers, our reporters, our editors, would need to step up and perhaps think a bit differently and think outside of our platforms. Media ownership was also a big thing I was thinking about, because maybe for the Kenyans and people who understand Kenyan media, you would say that perhaps 90% of the most important media in Kenya is owned by either political families or individuals who are very closely linked to politicians. And so then now, the more mature you become as first a person, but also as a reporter, a journalist, an editor, you get to really analyze critically the reasons behind some of the things that you're seeing in the newsroom. And of course, media ownership was one of them. And so that, in a nutshell, I'm just describing now the foundational blocks to this decision to leave the newsroom and start something by myself.
And just before I move to our next speaker, Aisha, so with the decision to start Debunk, because it's covered, you don't have a job, and you've been thinking about all these issues, what was the thing that made you think, this is what I need to do, and this is why I will do it, and this is the impact I would want to have?
There's always, I guess everyone says that there's always like this villain moment, like this moment that completely radicalizes you, and you're like, okay, all these things that I've been thinking, I want to leave. For me, I was working for Citizen Television. It's the most watched TV station in Kenya. I used to have a segment on one of the days called the Special Report, where I would spend about 15 minutes going into detail, digging data, digging reports, and explaining to Kenyans why a specific event is happening. And that it was a popular segment. A lot of people used to write in and email and tell us that, I now explain why the government is building this road, or I now explain why we need as citizens to stand up to this decision. But then the newsroom made a decision to remove that segment and instead replace it with a talk show. And as people know, I don't know what the case is in South Africa and in Nigeria and other countries, but if you switch on Kenyan television during prime time, during prime news time, whether it's morning or evening, you're 80% likely to bump into a panel of talking heads, of politicians going back and forth, of arguing, or of journalists giving their opinions, but it's a lot of talk shows that drive coverage. So that moment is what led me to say, I'm going to leave. And I thought a good idea would be to prioritize the things that I have observed as a journalist, and also the things that audiences, at least the people who are watching me, the people who are watching my team's work, what people were saying was meaningful to them. And that was that people wanted deeply researched stories, people wanted to understand the world better, and people wanted stories developed, written, and produced better. So
Yeah.
that is actually the catalyst that led me to think of Debunk specifically, and also to design it the way that I did, which is like very good storytelling, evergreen stories, going deep into issues, very nuanced reporting, but also backed up with very good visuals. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Ton, I'll come to you. Same questions. Why you decided to start Women Radio, and what kind of impact you were hoping or you have had?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good to see you again, Mama Ponya, and hi
Nice
to my
see you
colleagues.
too.
Thank you for this platform. So at age 7, my father was a broadcaster, and at age 7, I followed my father to Africa's first TV station, the very first TV station in Africa, that's WNTV. He used to work there. I was also so I got interested in media at that very young age. I was also the first broadcaster to go live on Ogun Radio. Ogun Radio is a government-owned radio station in Ogun State, Southwest Nigeria. I worked with Capital FM in London, used to be Choice FM, as a broadcaster. So my primary comfort place was radio and TV. Women Radio was birthed to bridge a gap within Nigeria's media space. And it was simple. We carried out a research, and 17% of media houses in the Lagos zone at that time only feature women's stories, women's issues, 17%. And even those radio stations, it's men that present those programs and produce those programs. Not that there's not anything wrong in that, but sometimes it's good to have women tell their stories. So Women Radio was it was birthed from that to fill a gap, to ensure that stories of women, female-centric stories that are underrepresented, can be brought to the fore. So is the platform, Women Radio is a platform that empowers women to use their voices to tell their stories. We promote diversity. We create a community of women's voices. Is women-owned, is women-led, is women-focused. So in a nutshell, I just call it a radio station by women, for women, and managed by women. What have we been able to do in the last 10 years? We've been able to mainstream women's voices in Nigeria's media. And so we advocate for women's voices. We advocate for women that are doing great things in the different fields, and we promote them. We call them iconic women, irrespective of wherever you are, because oftentimes, in our kind of space, when women make errors, you find the media focusing and amplifying the negatives. But what we do at Women Radio, no matter how little, as long as you're making an impact in your community, we highlight your stories. We work with other media as well to ensure that there's a 50-50, if I can call it a 50-50 representation. So you have your sports, you have your business, you have your economics, you have your politics discussions. We push other media to ensure that women make part of the reporters, of the journalists, of the guests, and analysts as well. So we have a repertoire of women's voices that we can share with any media. You often hear, we can't find women, but whatever area you want to discuss on your platform, we would be able to provide you with women who are experts. So for us, it's about reporting women until something happens. So we always want women to be in the media, or on areas that are of positivity. We train young female journalists. In the last, I'll say we've trained up to 67 young female journalists that we get them from across Nigeria, free training, and we take them through investigative reporting. And we've had about 20-something reports that had been exposed. For instance, we have a 21-year-old who has never done journalism before. We took her through the tools of investigative reporting. She went undercover to expose a quack doctor who was performing abortion on on the rich girls on 13, 14, 15. And what happened? She exposed that. It went into the public media. The doctor was arrested. And, so those are the kind of things we empower, we train, we build capacity of women in the media, and we ensure that women's voices are heard and women's voices are not dampened in the media. So that's how Women Radio came about. And today we're here.
Fantastic, absolutely amazing, because the average percentage of women's voices in our news is around 23%. So to have a radio station, and radio station is important because in Africa, radio is still the #1 medium of communication.
Yeah.
To have a radio station that focuses on women's stories by women is absolutely amazing. Thank you for that. You've touched on some issues that we'll come back to, but I'm going to go to Slindile so she can introduce herself. Slindile, your journey and why you decided to start your publications.
Thank you and good day, Mama Ponya, as well as the panelists and all the attendees. Thank you for this opportunity. So one of the many things that I've done in news organizations is financial journalism. And I first became a financial journalist in 2007. And by the time this opportunity happened, I'd had my first stint with Isolezo, because at some point I was a reporter at Isolezo before I became its editor. And having had that experience, and in fact, even at the beginning of my career, having worked at the SABC, specifically for the Zulu radio station's current affairs program, Ukhozi FM, I understood that market that caters for specifically indigenous languages. And I realized that there was a gap when it comes to how the economic stories are told. In fact, it was not happening. It would really be bits and pieces here and there, but there was no focus of saying that we need to be able to tell the economic story in an indigenous language. But at that point, as well, I had no intentions of necessarily being the one who then starts a media house that focuses on that. My thinking was I was working for a large media house that was already producing content in both English and vernacular. So I thought that, you just propose to your bosses to say, here's an opportunity, and hopefully they'll take it up, because I was happy to just be employed. But later on, my former employer gave me an opportunity to then start rising in the newsroom. And in fact, my first senior role, I was asked to launch an extension of the Isolezo brand, which was a Saturday edition. Then there was Isolezo Ngomgqibelo, but it obviously needed to be distinct from the flagship title, the daily, which was Hard News. It also needed to have also its own identity when compared to the Sunday edition, because at that time also Isolezo had already had a Sunday edition, and Sundays, the market had already been created at the Sunday market. If it's not your hardcore sort of Sunday Times city press, then everything else is tabloidy, entertainment. So we needed then to find something that will make the Saturday edition distinct or unique. And we then said, okay, we'll give it a more of a magazine-ish feel. It will be lifestyle primarily. And then when we were discussing then the content, we then said, okay, maybe let's also have personal finance. And in the very same organization, independent newspapers at that time, there were already English titles on Saturday, the Saturday Star, and in Durban, where I was based, Independent on Saturday, which already had personal finance. In fact, they had an entire inset about 8 or so pages of personal finance. So it made it easy. Obviously, those publications were catering for a different market, but we were able to use some of the content. So in the Saturday edition of Isolezo, we then had a personal finance page. And then when I then later on became the editor of the main Isolezo, the daily, we then also tried there to do other things. But it was not still at the level that I would have liked, because I couldn't obviously just then say, we'll change Isolezo into a financial publication. That's not what it was. And this was a publication that was already doing very well commercially. So why would you also, dismantle something that was working? And then we started having a conversation with my husband, who is the founder of the company, the holding company, Likanyile, and he already had also been in a financial newsroom. And we then came up with the idea, but because I was already in senior roles at work, we realized that launching publications while I was an editor elsewhere would really be a conflict of interest. Not so much because the company was going that direction, because I knew that the company was not. But still, it just would have created conflict. Do you go to a potential advertiser and speak on behalf of your employer, or on behalf of your family's business? So we stayed clear of it, but also it just made sense to say, let one of us continue working, because the realities of running a business, fortunately, we were already dealing with them. So it helped that there was a guaranteed pay slip until 2020, though, when there wasn't. And my former employer was the first large media organization at that time in our country to slash salaries. So we went, as a country, we went into lockdown in 2020 on the 27th of March. And literally a few days later, on the 3rd of April, we had a staff meeting where we were told that salaries would be reduced. And depending on where you were, they would be reduced from anything between 10% and 45%. As editors, we took a 45% salary cut. So whatever then as a family we had been holding on to, or sort of using as an excuse to say, no, we should just keep delaying this thing of going into publishing, then, it was eroded. That security was eroded. And though COVID was a difficult time, but for us, it actually made sense to say, if there is ever a time to actually try and see if this thing is going to work, it is now. And of course, yes, at that time we knew that we had to only do it as an online application. But what also helped was, though it was a difficult time, what really helped and gave us courage, other than, I guess, our faith, was that there was already an existing business. So this business already had revenue, and this was revenue that was not tied to advertising in any way. So it helped that, it's not that in 2020 we were starting from scratch altogether. In fact, by 2020, the business was already 6 years old. So it had built some sort of business, and it had some clients, though the publishing was new at that time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Cindy. And I'm seeing also a trend here that, if you keep delaying and delaying, at some point destiny will just come and push you, and you just have to do it even if you're not ready. But it works out. And so I'll stay with you, Slindile, and I'll go back with the same question to all our panelists. But, having an idea that you see has value is one thing, that has purpose and has value. But funding that idea, finding the seed funding for finding the seed funding to start, and making money off your idea, no matter how helpful and how valuable it is not easy. So if you guys could just take us, if you could take us through how did you in terms of getting the money? Because Cindy, that you're talking about, you had a 45% cut to your salary, but the only thing most stressful than not getting your salary, your full salary, is also being responsible for other people's salaries. So in many ways, as you become a business owner, and you now have to think about many more things financially. So if you could just tell us a little bit about how, in terms of funding, especially in the beginning, what that looked like for you, Slindile.
Okay. Yeah, you raised something very important. Having overhead costs will really grow gray hairs for you faster than anything. And we knew that right at the beginning, for example, we couldn't afford it. So we looked at what it was that we had for ourselves. When I say what it was, we looked at our strengths. So both Langa and I are journalists. That was one. Two, both of us had been, financial journalists, but also we have different strengths as well. Yes, at some point he was also writing stories and going to the field, but the latter part of his time in legacy news organizations, he spent as a sub-editor and a layout sub. And so he was doing that part, the production side of things. And I had, the writing, field reporting, but at this point, I obviously also had the newsroom management, and I had launched even an entire new publication, right? So we capitalized on that. So believe me, for the first 4 years of the publication, it was just Langa and I writing the stories, primarily with me writing and him subbing the stories. In between, we would have freelancers. At some point, we had interns, which was a program that was sponsored, so someone else was paying their stipends. But really, for the first 4 years, we were writing. But what we also did was we said, yes, we know that what differentiates us, language is a huge element to that, right? But we then also said, we want though to have other things. And that was to say, we were not going to do breaking stories. We really felt there were enough colleagues already in the ecosystem who were doing that. But other than the fact that, there were colleagues who were already doing it, we didn't have the resources to be able to do it. And we also, though we started online, and, online, it's a beast. You always have to keep feeding it. But we also decided that we were actually only going to do 2 stories a day. That was all. But we would do these 2 stories and do them really well. So we really tapped into all the experience that we had, and we looked at what is it that creates pressure in the newsroom. One, already it was lockdown. We couldn't have a print publication even if we wanted to. So one, we were going to minimize our cost by being online only, but also not trying to produce 5 or 6 stories a day. We segmented our content. We said, okay, but you still need to be able to have SMMEs, agriculture, technology, personal finance. So we would segment our content. And to this day, we continue to do that. That on Monday, there are certain things that we focus on. On Tuesdays, it's different topics, though it's all economics and business. So those are some of the things that we did. And of course, as I mentioned in my introduction, the business already had what we call the corporate comms unit. So this is where we write, we edit, we proofread, we translate. And that actually funded the journalism for the longest of time, up until last year. And we invested some of our money. So part of in fact, Langa had done it when he left the newsroom, that part of his pension went into the business. And we did the same thing when I left as well, that we took just some part of a portion from our pension and we invested into the business because I guess we really also believe in it. But from a practical point of view, and I know that, when it comes to business, and especially small businesses, I think there's generally a lot of pressure that is put onto small business owners to say, oh yeah, but these are the people who will create jobs. And I generally say that sometimes we underestimate the value or the importance of saying that when you say small businesses must create jobs, if that job that the business is able to create is just the job that sustains me as the founder, that's one job created. And that's okay. It's, it's not to say that a small business should create jobs, then it should be, I should assume the responsibility and the pressure of creating jobs when I can't afford to pay for those jobs. So we said, okay, how many jobs is this business creating now? So it's creating 2 jobs. And those 2 jobs are feeding our family. And that's a priority for us as a start before we want to start thinking about other families. And we were not trying to be these grand people making these huge things and portraying an image that was not real. So we just stayed with it. We focused on it and we said, that's fine. This is what we will do. 2 stories a day. And it's just going to be us for now. And it's okay. At some point when, the time is there and things are able to work out, then you add the jobs. And it was not as easy as I'm saying, because writing, trying to also fundraise, trying to do this is not easy. It was exhausting. Even now, 5 years later, we really still haven't taken leave, though we are able to take a breather now here and there. But I really have not been able to take the 21 days or 20 days of annual leave like it used to happen when I was employed. And I look forward to that day. I really look forward to that day, Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Slinile. Really great points that you were mentioning there. I mean, the program EntreprenHER. So Frey Foundation has this program that they run as part of their EntreprenHER stream, where we have women entrepreneurs go through this program that includes going through doing accredited and non-accredited courses. And I remember in one of the first sessions of the training for those courses, we spoke about what you're just mentioning just now, about being very clear about your goals and about the little steps of getting there. Because sometimes as entrepreneurs, people feel frustrated that I'm not this huge company that's employing hundreds or 10 people, whatever. But if you have thought about what you were just saying just now, Sindile, that I'm going to start small, and maybe my desire is not even to employ hundreds of people. Just because I'm an entrepreneur now, I have to do this. But having those conversations with yourselves and being clear about what you want to do, how you're going to get there, also alleviates a lot of stress and alleviates a lot of unnecessary pressure and keeps you focused and keeps your gratitude jar full, and you're able to keep going. So thank you for also raising that really important thing there. And Asha, I'll come to you with the same question, right? Great idea, Debunk Media. I wanted to, you say you wanted to focus on investigation and going deeper nuances. One of the reasons that bigger newsrooms often don't do this is because they can't afford to have journalists spending so much time on that. So for you, at that beginning, how did you think you were going to finance the especially the beginning parts of Debunk, and how did you actually end up financing or getting the finance to start your publication?
So for me, I think in hindsight, even as I listened to Slindile giving her story, I realized that I took a longer route without even knowing. As soon as I started thinking about this idea or these possibilities, I started developing a business plan. So thinking about what would it cost to actually do the things that I want to do. I was in the newsroom, and because I was an editor managing a group of specialist reporters, I knew how much it used to cost us to, for example, send someone to a different region or a different country. And I knew it was very expensive. So then the other thing is that producing video is much more, it's a different ball game than writing print and just publishing stories. Because yes, you do have the editorial folks, so you have your reporters and you have your editors, but you have to think about the support team. So you need a camera person, and then you need a video editor, and then if you have graphics, you need a graphics person, and the list then just continues. So I launched Debunk in July of 2020. But I remember one of the more critical moments about thinking about financing this idea was in 2016, when after I won the CNN award, one of the things that I won basically was to spend some time at the CNN newsroom in Atlanta in a fellowship. So I went for my fellowship, and then I scheduled some meetings in Washington, and I put aside some money out of my salary, and I went and met with potential funders because I knew it was going to take a lot of money to, the idea in my head was much bigger than even what we have today, right? Like that over ambitiousness. So I scheduled some meetings, and I remember this specific meeting, which in my mind I thought was going to be so promising. And that funder basically asked me, there are so many other journalists in Kenya who are starting things. Why don't you folks just come together and start something stronger? And basically, there was this hesitation to back up an idea that had not even, there was no minimum viable product, right? An MVP. So I left there feeling very dejected. And then I remember just, booking another flight to see my friend somewhere else. And I was like, let me just distress. So that was 2016. And over the next couple of years, I spoke to my colleagues in Nairobi, people who are doing other startups. I tried to see if I could plug into those projects, but it just didn't work out. Or it was either maybe some of the ideas were too investigative, or some ideas just I couldn't connect with, or I felt that or they couldn't afford to hire me. So it was just a myriad of things that came up. But I kept speaking to potential funders. I kept speaking to people who could back up the project. I spoke to other people in the newsroom to be like, guys, do you want to quit and do this thing? And everyone was just like, you are crazy. We know, you don't like your life. You're going to terror zones. We're not joining you. But in the end, there's an opportunity that came up in Nairobi that I spotted. This was in 2019. There's a graduate media school that had an incubation hub. They were experimenting with it and collaborating with DW Academy. It's the Aga Khan Innovation Center, and they wanted to incubate media ideas. And they had opened up the applications for that 1 year incubation opportunity. And there was a 20,000 USD grant attached to joining that first cohort, and also getting coaching on business, on media, and other things. So I applied with the idea, and I got in. So the cohort had 2 ideas. And so then, of course, the decision was, do you keep doing it while you are in the newsroom? And when I evaluated, I just thought there was no way that I could do one thing halfway. I wanted to put my full thoughts there. Luckily, I had built some reserves to take me maybe that thing they say, have a 6-month emergency plan, financial plan. And I just, naively thought, it's going to take 6 months to, to get this kick-ass idea off the ground, and I'll make some revenue out of it. A lot of other things happened in after that, but that's how Debunk was born. So with that 20K grant, what we were able to do is we weren't being allowed to pay salaries, so I still couldn't hire, but it was something that you could use to at least build the initial infrastructure. So you could use it to purchase equipment, maybe build a website. And I mean, I don't think without that grant, that Debank would have been able to take off. So it was very, very critical. Then there was also some additional perks. So for example, the Innovation Center would give us a program. It would give each idea a program where you could second anyone from your team to get training on a specific issue. So let's say if it's storytelling, if it's product thinking and product testing, if it's fundraising. So I put a small team together. And as I've told you, by the time we were launching the idea, it was already in the middle of the pandemic. Some folks had already lost their jobs. And so we just put this initial group together, and people were getting this training, and then somehow I was able to then get additional funding to pay people to stay on the project. Then it was building blocks from there. But that's basically the story of how Debank started. I should also say that 6 months in, one of the things that was very difficult is being a sole founder and being the person who has to think of everything. So you are the editorial brain power, but you're also the person fundraising. You're also the person taking care of other people. We had a big project happening because there was a push in Kenya to change the constitution. And I thought that this would be a good opportunity outside of the COVID story for the bank to now, cement its credibility. And so I brought in a good friend of mine. His name is Isaac. And we had been nominated at the CNN Award. That's where we met that number of years back. And I brought him into the project because he had a print background, and he had a background of doing long form written stories, which also now required a lot of rigor and a lot of research. So we came together after that project and put our heads together and said, okay, let's then dedicate our next number of years to building the bank. And so then we both also just plugged in whatever resources we could into the idea. And we've been building it together for the last 4 years as co-founders.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. And I mean, I think some great takeaways there, and I'll come back to you, Asha, about continued financial sustainability, both Asha and Slindile. But I want to go to Ton, and I want if you can, same question about the funds for starting, but I see there's also questions in the chat. We were going to come to this, but if you can also speak to, it's one thing also to get the initial seed funding, but to continue for 10 years, sustaining a business that employs and all of these things, that's another ball game. So if you can speak about how the funding when you started and how you have funded the radio station throughout the 10 years, and what has really worked, and some any kind of thoughts and tips you would have for the people thinking of starting their businesses or already have started.
Thank you very much, Mama Ponya. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So let me first of all acknowledge both Slindile and especially Asha. Asha said that she did it alone. She did it alone until about 4 years when she brought in a partner. I think Asha is treading on lines and lanes that we need to acknowledge and support and respect. Now, so Women Radio is not online. We have a physical studio. We have a physical building. We have 3 studios in a building. Okay. We employ 30 staff. So servicing and operating is tough. I'm not going to come here and sugarcoat. It is tough. Okay. If you operate in Nigeria, you will understand what I'm saying. Power, electricity is the biggest problem, is the biggest challenge for any entrepreneur. So you make money instead of you to have savings and profit and gains and reinvest. into building capacity, into building, into, getting more better equipment. You have to put that money into funding of having electricity. So paying staff salary, we have roughly 17 full-time staff, 13 interns, young graduates, and we pay salary every year, because I'm aware that non-payment of salary is not only synonymous to Nigeria. It happens in South Africa. It happens in other African countries. For 10 years consistently, Women Radio, we have never missed paying a salary. Staff get health insurance. Pension is being paid. We give bonuses at the end of a year, depending on the gains and the profit we make. So it can be challenging and tough. When we started 10 years ago, there was no seed money. Women Radio is a family business, by the way. It's a family business. So there was no seed money. It was the money of the co-owners, especially the chairman of the organization, who is more buoyant. So revenue generation and funding was our biggest hurdle, right? It was the biggest hurdle. Traditional advertisers, which run in a male-dominated field, saw Women Radio as non-commercial. The name alone, Women Radio, they thought we are an NGO. Some even think we are a refuge. You understand? So that name alone, we experienced a lot of challenges, no funding. And I also want to talk about a lot of personal sacrifices. At the initial years, I was not drawing any earnings at all, nothing. I still spend my private money, right? As I said, private life was disrupted. I used to live in the UK. 10 years ago, I left my 13-year-old daughter, 16-year-old son, and moved to Nigeria. And of course, my husband to set it up. So a lot of personal sacrifices. For anybody who is thinking of doing something, you need to think of a lot of personal sacrifices. You need to be ready to have lonely days, lonely nights, cry, and what have you. And when Kath was talking about imposter syndrome, honestly, I still suffer and I still experience imposter syndrome. So, it is a tough one. I don't want people sitting down thinking, okay, she's a success. Absolutely no. It is an everyday struggle, and until grants came from the likes of MacArthur Foundation, Action Aid, Ford Foundation, ACT, UN Women, until those funds started coming in, there were things we had to put in place. As I said, we faced tough questions. How do you fund a mission-led platform without watering down your values? What did we do? We stopped chasing just any business opportunity, and we started finding and creating the ones that align with our female-centric mission. We always say that we are unapologetically female. We build credibility by measuring what matters, right? Not just the reach but impact for us. So we had initiatives like women voter registration through grassroots surveys, right? We have initiatives like Safe Space for women after our GBV campaigns. And so adverts started coming in because we stayed focused on what we were doing, right? The lesson for me is that money will always follow clarity. The more focused you stay and you become on serving what you're doing, we're serving women's needs, the more funders and partners came looking for us and are interested in what we were doing. We talk about resilience because we're still talking about sustainability and resilience. Resilient isn't a slogan, Mama Ponya. It is a survival strategy, and we have been through it, right? Is it from political pressure when our reporting made some uncomfortable? Everybody talk about Chibok girls all over the world, Chibok girls. You have reporters sitting at 5-star hotels in Nigeria talking about Chibok girls. We actually went into Chibok town and spoke to the parents of those girls. So, political pressure when you're reporting made some uncomfortable. And as I said, low advertising revenue because our female-centric editorial focus didn't cater to the mainstream, right? You've heard of the Sex for Grades. We worked with the BBC for the Sex for Grades. We lost account for exposing that, right? So, and there were internal challenges from burnt out to bandwidth issues. So what we did was to embrace experimentation. I'm talking about what we have done in the last, I mean, as I said, funding came, but I need to acknowledge NAMIP now. NAMIP, MDIF also came with funding, but the funding was to build our capacity and help us to understand that radio is business, it's not just about passion. Okay, so we embraced experimentation. From being a radio only, we became a multi-platform house. We have podcasts, we have newsletters, we have live streams, we have mobile app, and that's why we say we are the unconventional radio, women radio. We're not your usual radio station of sound. We had to dip our hands into different things. We run conferences. We do one of the biggest conferences in Nigeria. Okay, we established the first female-centric academy, the Women Radio Center, in 2022, where we have trained about 89 young female journalists. I mentioned what happened to one of them, and we don't charge journalists for this, right? We built a community of women. So there are 36 states, including the Federal Capital Territory in Nigeria. So we have built a community of women across those 36 states, okay, including the FCT, through our Women Radio Network. And that's one thing, I want to encourage my colleagues here to do. Once you have your programs, start creating a platform, a community of people who love and enjoy what you're doing. So we've built that community. It's not just an audience. We listen, we respond, and we adapt, especially to the underserved groups, rural women with disabilities, and young people. And we're hoping to monetize, right? To start subscription and membership for the almost 7,000, 8,000 women that we have created that network. And again, what did we do? We diversified and we established the first female, not even the first female, the first AI radio host in Nigeria. I was showing Asha the other time she was in Nigeria. We call it Nimi. So Nimi is there 24 hours. She keeps your company as a woman. She's on our website. She does programs on radio. You can ask her any questions. If it's gender-based violence issues, any kind of questions. Nimi was actually fashioned after my colleague, who is a normal human being, Nimi. So our Nimi speaks in a language, in an accent that you understand. So these are the things we have had to do, that, and the conviction that women deserve platforms that speak to them and fight for them consistently without apology. I mean, the lesson that I have learned, as I said, is that money will follow clarity. Stay true to what you're doing. The more focused you are, the more focused, I hope you can hear me. A call was coming through. The more focused we are, on serving women's needs, the more people will attract and come and want to, invest and fund your initiatives. I hope I've addressed this to an extent.
No, you really have. And I mean, those are excellent insights. You're reminding me actually of something that Paula started with it also in her session, where she said, just because you are a purpose-driven organization doesn't mean you can't make profit and you can't make money. And I love that money will follow clarity. When you spoke about just sticking to your values, be willing to walk away from certain deals because this is what we want to do. And a lot of things that you spoke about, but I also see in what you were saying, the attitude toward innovation and experimentation. Because I think one of the things, and why legacy media in many ways is in a lot of trouble now, is that for many there was, as Asha also said, this resistance to innovation, adaptation, experimentation, and that is very important in entrepreneurship. So thank you so much for that, Tone. We'll certainly come back to you with some of that. And I know we're quickly running out of time, but because I know that this issue of financial sustainability is a big one for many entrepreneurs and those who are thinking about starting their own organizations. And I see here I see Denise was also asking about advertising on digital platforms. Denise said, regarding advertising on digital platforms, are there preferred revenue models for media that are sustainable? Jacqueline says overhead costs can be a nightmare. I am a starter and I'm currently using Family to help me through at least with them, and I don't have any salary. And then Emmanuel had a question. How would you recommend navigating challenges and the balance between authenticity, brand voice, and pressures to go viral and follow trends? I'll summarize some of these questions just now. I just want to get a sense of them. And then Ima had a comment. Really appreciate what you said. You creating jobs, even if it's just two. Yes, absolutely. And then there was also some comments about the points that our participants are taking. And then so for me, I'm going to come back to you, Asha. And if you can just speak a little bit about the how in terms of financial sustainability, we know how you got started, but how are you maintaining? And what are some of your thoughts given the current landscape in terms of in terms of philanthropy and aid? Things are changing in that landscape. And we know that a lot of the new digital media platforms on the African continent have heavily relied on grants. So given the changes that are happening there, what are some of your thoughts around that, and how you have sustained Debunk Media? But as you add to that, I know I'm piling up quite a lot, but as you're commenting on that, please, can you also talk about this issue of balancing authenticity and your mission with also how you make money?
So on the first question, yes, we did have that 20K grant USD at the beginning, but of course the realization very quickly was that it's I mean, it's a mere drop, maybe even smaller than a drop in the ocean that you would need. But I think the thing that has really helped Debunk, and especially when now we put our heads together with my co-founder Isaac, is that we thought of, you know, maximizing on the opportunities we were getting with grant funding. Because the truth is that we did get additional funding after that. Just that, like Tone said, when the foundations come in, then now you really see your project picking momentum. Of course, having launched Debunk in the middle of COVID, our primary story was COVID. And so philanthropies that are interested, that at the time were interested in healthcare, but also just in civic engagement, then found our project interesting because it was different and it breathed a different type of conversation into the Kenyan sphere. But I think you have to think very strategically. I have found that, and we've made this, it's not a mistake, but we have done this at Debunk and we've learned through it, is that when you get grant funding, what you do is that you try to pay bills, you try to pay salaries, and you try to just keep the thing going, right? And then you have to rely on more funding. And then if the funding is cut, then you're stuck, right? I would advise anyone who is starting a project and has an opportunity to get grant funding, use that to build the infrastructure, like fight for that, right? So for us, what that looked like was building our tech, for example, right? Like owning our tech, because in today's ecosystem, you cannot be building a digital business, media business, without thinking about tech, right? Without thinking of who owns your IP, who owns the stuff you're developing, where's your website hosted, any tools that you're developing in-house, who owns it, right? So for us, we were really negotiating with our partners, our funding partners, to help us build that side, then to help us organize the organization. So for example, help us, put together a board, help us to streamline our legal and our HR. So help us build systems, because outside of just doing the project, that those systems, that back end is the engine for what you're running. Otherwise, if you just publish stories and you just put them on the website and that's the only thing you're thinking about, then the minute you don't have money to produce those stories, you're done, right? So then outside of that, I think the core, the driver of your product is the editorial thinking. Is that clarity that my colleague Tone was talking about? It's that, what is the offering to the audience? And of course, I spoke a lot about what I felt people needed to read or people needed to watch. Very quickly into your project, you then learn what the audiences want. You look at comments, you see what they're saying, you make time to speak to them more. You actually then now get, wake up calls like, oh, I thought this is going to be perceived and received really, really, really well, but it won't. People want other things. And then you really have to serve the audience needs. When you do that, it becomes easy to think of revenue. You cannot begin the process. Of course, you should have an idea of how much things will cost, but you cannot begin the process from there, right? If, for example, for us, when we realized that our greatest offering was in long form storytelling, and maybe I can also answer another question I've seen there, which Mwelo, who asks, like, how do you build an audience? When we were getting into the last election in 2022, the bank was getting maybe 500 to 1,000 readers on our stories. That's a very small audience in a country of about 57 million people. 43 million of whom have a smartphone and have access to data. So the mobile penetration in Kenya is more than 80%. So if you have only 1,000 people reading you, that is really like a very small percentage. So to build that strategy, what we did was that we wrote these political profiles. They were very long, about 8,000 words. And then we got a co-publishing partner, one of the national newspapers in Kenya, and they would publish, we would do all the editorial work, and we would have the editorial independence, but they would give us a platform. So they would have very good, well-researched content that they can't afford to produce, but they could then now publish. So it also could give them credibility. And so they would publish every Wednesday. It was the splash story, the front page story, our profiles. And when we ran them, first, our website, of course, got better hits. They were the most read stories for that publication on the website. And they had to print an additional 5,000 to 10,000 copies of the newspaper on the days that they were running our stories. So that told us something. We learned that there's a higher value to the stories that we were producing. And so instead of picking those stories and just dumping them on the website and leaving them there, we developed a revenue stream out of them. So now, after that, all the other long form stories that we're publishing, we created a product called Debunk Quarterly, and it's a magazine of long form storytelling out of East Africa, which we put it together really well. You would say it's one of it's one of the products that you would consider on the higher spectrum, because we sell it for about $20, that magazine. It's something that you can put on your coffee table. It's evergreen. It's stories that give you a lot of nuance about, not just about politics, but about culture and about people. And so that we sold it at an event. The event was sold out. And so that started showing us the other revenue streams outside of advertising that we could pursue. So for example, that print publication is a big one for us. And we have also then seen the opportunity to even produce additional print magazines. For example, one geared towards women is something that we're producing right now. And that has been informed by our stream on the website. You'll see Debunk Women. And we saw that the numbers for our women content grew, like the people who read our women content, the women who read our women content surpass the people who read our other content. So that is a ready audience that, one, you're serving a need that they have, but also can really create a revenue generating opportunities for your platform. So I hope that answers it. For sure, we have been very lucky to get a good chunk of philanthropy funding over the last number of years. But I think it is like, how do you ride on that luck and make sure that then that funding works for you even after the funding cuts emerge, which is build infrastructure, build tech, buy your equipment, think of security, build systems, build the admin side, and then now experiment with storytelling. Experiment, because you're getting funding for it. That allows you, by the time you're generating your own income, to prioritize and to know that you're not going to spend the money coming in without thinking and without strategy.
Thank you, Asha. Fantastic. And I mean, what you're saying is so important. I know that with the MDIF, one of the things they're always saying is that part of when they're working with media, news media, they often find that the founders are very good with the stories, are very good with, we want to tell these stories, we want to do this with the stories, but they don't have systems. They don't have accounting systems, they don't have admin systems, they don't have HR systems, they don't have tech systems. And therefore, as a funder, it's difficult to fund that kind of organization because you cannot tell how well they're able to manage the money that, even if they're able to tell great stories, will the machine be able to manage these funds? And it's very important that as many of us who are in journalism lean more towards the creative side, it's very important to realize that, especially when you start a business, you need to have those systems in place. You need to force yourself to think a certain way. You need to get help where you need to get help, but you cannot run without those systems. Thank you so much for that, Asha. And the other thing that I think I got out of what you were saying and your answer to Witumelo is part of what Paula said in the beginning about strategy. Because the things that you are talking about, we decided to do this, we decided to do this. If you are not taking time to think about the company and think about the strategy, they're not going to come to you. Some might come on when you're on the run, but it's important to have that time to really think and strategize and have a strategy and a plan for what you want to do. So thank you so much for that, Asha.
In fact, if I could add something really small, what we did as the two co-founders is that Isaac handles the editorial. So I have not done stories for the longest time. I rarely sit in editorial meetings. And so I'm managing director, which means I tackle everything business related. And that means you have to completely rewire your mind and how you think. From being a storyteller to now being a manager, being a CEO. And it means you will, I think not even might, you will have to take additional courses. You'll need to learn how to read books. You'll need to learn what tech looks like and what your tech people are doing. So it becomes a whole different ball game the minute you start the project, because it means now you have to reskill yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, Asha. And so I'm going to just ask you one round of questions before we do the closing. And seeing, I'll come to you first. So we one of the things we wanted to touch on here was burnout. And because, as you know, you mentioned, Slee, that you haven't taken your 21 days yet and you're looking forward to that. How do you ensure that you do not burn out, given the amount of work that you now have to do? How do you ensure that you are still having family time, you are still getting enough rest, sleeping enough hours, you are still showing up in your other parts of your life, and you are still dealing with the work challenges as they come, because there are many, from just, having to deal with the imposter syndrome, being a woman in business, and then you have to put in so many hours. So what are your strategies, Slindile, for making sure that you don't burn out and you are able to be resilient, and keep coming back and keep bouncing back? I think it was Tuan who spoke about resilience. How do you maintain your resilience and not burn out given the different pressures that come with being a business owner?
I actually posted about it just last week on Facebook. I take afternoon naps. The only time I don't take them is if they clash with a commitment or if I am traveling. But otherwise, I take afternoon naps. It's one of the best things. So I'm a morning person and my day starts very early. I prefer it that way. But from around midday, my energy levels are so depleted that I really do need to take that afternoon nap. So it really helps. I try to the best of my ability to take some walks, morning walks on the promenade in Durban. But I'm not consistent with it, but I do see the value when I am consistent. I think it does help that I work with my husband, so I don't have to explain the pressure of the business or anything. So if I say I need time out, I need time out, like my afternoon naps. But I also learned a long time ago that one of the biggest scams is multitasking. And I know that it's associated with women, or women are encouraged, but I learned a long time ago that I'm unable to do it, which is why I'm still one of those people. When I'm in a meeting, unless it's absolutely necessary, I'm one of those people who switches off their phone because I can only do one thing at a time. I'm not responding to emails on the phone, and I'm also in the meeting. I don't do that. And I liked what somebody that I spoke to last week actually said about multitasking. He said that multitasking is doing everything less well. And it so resonated with me because while I would have never phrased it that way many years ago when I realized that it doesn't work, I thought that's what I'm actually going to say as well when referring to multitasking. So I don't multitask. So when I need to be a parent, then I'm a parent. When I need to be at work, then I'm at work. And my children, fortunately, they've always had a working mother, so it's nothing strange. At some point, everyone is at work, they're at school, whatever. And there's a time when then we are with family, we are doing other things. And there's a time when I'm not even with family, when I'm with my friends, or so. And I've never tried. I also have never tried to be superwoman. So it really helps, thankfully, that we have a full-time helper who's been an incredible support, and so I'm not one of those women who cook dinner every day. I just can't, and I don't even attempt to, and I don't even feel guilty about it. And that's the way it is. So those are some of the things that I do. But honestly, the biggest thing is the afternoon nap. The best thing. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. Slindile, whenever you are speaking, I get this sense of somebody who's really thought very well about who they are and what they want, and they're really just doing their lives at their own pace, with their own rules. And I think that's really important in terms of longevity as well. Because you want to be clear about who you are and what your rules, what you're willing to give up. Like Tuan said, there are many sacrifices. So just being clear about which sacrifices you're willing to make, which ones you are not willing to make, and moving at your own beat, and being authentic to you, very important. Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Tuan? I mean, you mentioned, 30 staff members, along with your family and your other relationships and your other commitments and the other things that you do, because I know that women radio is not necessarily the only thing that you do. So how do you maintain that? How do you make sure that you don't burn out and you're still able to show up in long term and you're still able to bounce back when things happen? How do you do that?
Thank you very much, Mama Ponya. Let me, first of all, acknowledge the people that I work with. Every opportunity I have, I always like to acknowledge the core people that I work with. I'll say 90% of the staff strength. Can you hear me? 90% of the staff strength of Women Radio are young people. Young, energetic, very energetic, and committed and focused women and men. And they are the reason that I can come to this kind of a platform and speak so eloquently like this, right? And so when Slindili says she's not a superwoman, I am not a superwoman. I make sure that I have people around me who are able to support what I'm doing. Okay. So I need to also just again reiterate and acknowledge my team. They are the ones that make things happen. Okay. So we have systems because when I left the UK, I understood systems. Okay. So we have a project team, right? Who write our applications. They write grant applications. These are young girls who had not done radio or project before in their entire lives. We don't employ experienced people. The young men and women, after school, after university, they join us and then we teach them, we train them. They understand the vision, they understand the mission. And so they are committed into what they're doing. They become experts at the job. So there is a project team who is able to implement projects, write proposals, right? There is a finance team, right? Who also we ensure that they go on regular trainings. We have the HR, we have all of those systems. But then, Nami Pagin came and helped us to strengthen the system. Now, let me quickly come back to burning out. I have a team that are reliable, that are good. Okay. So I'm able to do other things. I have a family that is very understanding, right? A family that is very understanding, immediate family. I have an extended family that is also very supportive. And I have friends who make sure that, oh, Tony, you need this, you need that. They make themselves available to support, to help. I also am a helping hand to them as well. So it's not a one-sided thing. So you've got to be able to give for people to give to you. Okay, I'm there for them when their children are getting married. I'm there for my children, so they're there for me as well. So that is very key. Now, I also pray you've got to have a relationship with your creator. Whatever it is you worship, you've got to have a relationship. But there are words I want to drop here. It's called being deliberate, being intentional, incalculative, planning things. I am very deliberate. I'm very calculative. I'm very intentional. My phones are switched off before I go to bed, no matter what the emergency. At a very young age, I taught my children, you have a doctor, right? You have medical health issues, you can go to the GP, okay? You're scared, quickly call on God, right? So I make sure that they are independent at a very young age. So you're not going to call me at 12 minutes and say, oh, I'm having nightmares. I can't do anything. I'll only pray with you, but quickly learn how to pray to God. I can only hug you, I can only encourage you, but I've armed people with the skills for them to be able to be independent. And that has worked for me. Now, I'm not sentimental. You cannot run a business and be sentimental. You've got to think like the men. You can look good, right? But you've got to think like the men. You cannot afford to be sentimental. You will burn yourself out. One thing I do is I take my time when recruiting. I'm very slow in recruitment. There's a team that does the recruitment, and then maybe they will just give me the final 2 or 3, and then I'll take my time and speak to them. I can be very slow, and I know I'm slow sometimes, and my colleagues, oh, MD, you need to do this, so you need to do that. So I'm very slow when it comes to recruiting people. The same way I'm very slow when it comes to making friends. I take my time. But when it comes to fire somebody, I don't think twice. I'm very swift in firing. The moment you have evidence, and it's not sentiment, you have evidence that this person does not align with the vision and the mission, there's no point. So I'm very slow to recruiting, but swift when it comes to getting rid of the bad eggs, because you don't want them to come and mash up what you're doing. Then the other thing I just want to talk about is building and sustaining takes time. The media space is very demanding, very overwhelming, can be very toxic, and it burns you out. So you've got to factor. One thing I would do better is to factor in counseling and mental well-being for your staff. Yes, I talk to them and I tell them to make sure they do it, but it's good to factor that in. And if you have, we've had funding in the past that we've done it. You have funding, think of counseling and a support system to help the team. During COVID-19 was when I knew that counseling and support is very key. My colleagues, as the CEO, had an option to say, I don't want to watch the TV. And I stopped watching the TV because I was also having a mental breakdown, right? During COVID-19. You see people are dying left, right, center. And I wasn't in London. I was locked down in Abuja, not even in Lagos with my colleagues. My family are in London. So alone in that flat, I was having a mental breakdown. Right. Then I blocked TV off, radio. I wasn't watching. I wasn't doing anything. Then I think of my colleagues in the office, the journalists who are having to report these sad stories. That was when I knew, and they burnt out. And that was when I knew that you've got to commit to bring in a support system and counseling when you're doing these things. You cannot stay still. Journalists, especially those who do remote work, you've got to keep moving, exercise your body, walk, jump, dance. I love to dance, especially for remote workers. Okay, you've got to move your body. You can't stay still. You've got to seek help. There's no shame in asking for support and for help. You've got to take time off work. Look, when CEOs find out that you're good at your work, there's a possibility that they keep asking you to do other people's tasks. You've got to be able to say, no, I have to take a break. Take a break, foster good relationship with family and friends. And most importantly, as I said, you've got to be very spiritual in what you do. I do pray, and it's good to pray. So please be deliberate, be intentional. Every human being can be replaced. So don't think you are good or you're the best. The moment you go, you resign today, or you're asked to leave, somebody else will do the job and probably do it better than yourself. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Tone. So many things there. But I'm quickly going to give you, Asha, also a chance to share your thoughts, and then we'll just wrap up and finish. Asha?
Yeah, I think I echo what Tone and Slindile have said. Personally, what I do, I sleep 8 hours every day. Like, that's a non-negotiable. I wish I could get a chance to take an afternoon nap, but it's hard. We have like an open, working space. And so if you nap, then that means the reporter on the other side is looking at you as you take your nap. But I would say for us at the bank, we think about this question of burnout very seriously because we have gone through it. I have gone through burnout. My co-founder has gone through burnout. And we've also seen that it's detrimental to the rest of the team because it's likely that then other people in your team are also going through the same thing. And so it becomes then a matter of what is your philosophy. And our philosophy is that we are members of society. And for us to talk about what good members of society are, we have also to become a good member of society. And that means you have to be well-rounded. You have to, your cortisol has to be at good levels. You have to take care of yourself. You have to be good to the people around you, to your family, to your friends, just like Tone said. And so, for instance, we're very strict about 5 p.m. If There's no pressing, even when there's a pressing project and we find that people are in the office at 5 p.m., then we say why. It means that there is a gap in the system of production. Of course, we're a newsroom, and even though we take time with our stories, there's still going to be moments where there's a lot of pressure and we have to be here, like over the weekends or overnight. For instance, when Kenya had the protests last year, it was a very, testing time for us, demanding time for our newsroom. But then after that, you have to take a break. We've now introduced publishing breaks. We've learned from our partners at the continent. They do have publishing breaks after every 10 publications, issues. Then they take like a 2-week break, and then they come back. That's the new world that we live in. You don't always have to be switched on. If Tone can switch off her phone at night, it means that your audience is also doing that. And so it means that you can also inculcate that into your publishing systems, into how you work, into how you think about this question of burnout, of sustainability, not just for yourself as the leader, but also for everyone else who works with you. So that's what I would add to the many points that my colleagues have shared on that.
Excellent. Thank you, Asha. And can I just one, 2, 3 sentences in closing for you, to the women here who have started their businesses or wanting to start, or are just managers in newsrooms. What your final thoughts? Asha, you can go ahead.
Oh, I thought Tone was going to speak. I think generally I would say I've been a panelist in many conversations, but I've also heard other people speak about their experiences. And I feel generally that there is no magic bullet for everyone listening. We're sharing our stories. Everyone has their own trajectory. There is also a huge thing that I think people don't talk about, which is luck. That sometimes you start a project and the right things collude and the universe works in your favor and your project then becomes successful. I would say just get started, right? Create something, learn from it, learn from the people who are consuming it. Don't bankrupt yourself because you wanna work on a media project. Very important. Don't bankrupt your family. Like really consider yourself in this process. And I think the biggest lesson is yourself and the communities that you serve. Everything else that you hear from people like us or people who've done their own projects and they've been successful or they have something to share, those are stories and perhaps could just serve as more data to help you make your decisions and strategize on your project.
Great, thank you. Tone?
So I just quickly wanted to mention that there is something else before I answer that. There's something else that we do at Women Radio that we created. We have because it's a women-centered organization, right? And you find out that you have different types of human beings and women because we're human beings as well. Some of us are very vocal. Some people are not vocal. Some people are a little bit laid back. So we created this anonymous link, okay, where every staff, you can comment or you can complain. And I think it's something that to do wherever you find yourself, because I think getting people's opinion matters a lot. And from that anonymous link, we were able to reduce our working hours. Okay, and we were able to listen to people. So if there's anybody who is thinking of what should I do, make sure you do a lot of survey and ask people questions. Now, for me, I just want to quickly say that life is full of challenges. Nothing good comes easy. There's nothing. Working is not easy. Eating is also not easy because you've got to work to earn to be able to eat. Life is not easy. It comes with its challenges, and you've just got to face life with its challenges. Be grateful wherever you find yourself. Be grateful. If you used to have 3 square meals and now you can only have breakfast and lunch, remember somebody doesn't even have anything to eat, or somebody does not even have the health to do what they want to do. So be grateful wherever you find yourself. Start small. Start small, collaborate, because I'm finding out that in a world that is the economy is shrinking, collaboration has helped women radio a lot. We've poured into people, and now they're pouring back into us. So collaboration is key. Take care of yourself. Life is full of challenges. Be grateful always. And I think Asha said it, be kind, be kind, be kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Slee?
I'd say one is really, just focus on the gap that you have identified, and understand your strengths. We have really capitalized on the fact that we are bilingual writers. So even whether you're talking even about media training, we don't try to do media training that everyone is doing. We've looked for opportunities where we can capitalize on the fact that our training, we are able to train you also factoring in the vernacular element. So if I may give a quick example, for example, we offer financial institutions training where we say your spokespeople may have the technical know-how, even those who are mother tongue speakers, but they may not necessarily be confident to make media commentary in vernacular when it comes to telling the economic story or analyzing economics, because on a daily basis, they've been working, with English so much. And we come in and we say, but we write these stories and we have the vocabulary. We can help your people build confidence on how to make media commentary in vernacular. So really capitalize on that which makes you unique. I would also say that trademarking your work. I know that in the beginning you may not think that it's important, and you may think that, oh no, I'll trademark when I get to a certain stage. But really, the habits that you adopt right at the beginning, whether those are habits such as making sure that you're compliant with your country's laws of trading and business, tax, and those habits, if you do it while your business is generating 1,000 rand, you will grow with them even when your business is generating 10 million rand. You're not going to suddenly be someone who is compliant or who operates legally when your business is making a lot of money. In fact, if anything, most likely at that point, you will see no reason or justification for doing it. So adopt good habits right from the beginning. And I think that I would also say, yes, collaborating, but sometimes we think that, I think to be successful means that, we need to be the next big whatever in that space. But you can provide something that is not in the space without necessarily becoming big. So collaborate, but don't let go of your IP. Whatever happens, sometimes the pressure of the cash flow may make you just want to say, okay, you will just sell everything to people. But if you're just going to focus on money, there's a lot more that you may lose, that you may find that in the long term, it is detrimental to your business. And sometimes people may say that, but you don't really have the negotiating power in the beginning. But I think that if you put your foot down, you are able to, to do those things. So I'll also say, look after yourself. Networking as well. Networking and attending events such as this, and being part of industry bodies in your respective countries really opens opportunities. And of course, funding. We've also in the last year finally started being successful in securing funding from the MDIF through Amplify South Africa and the MDDA. But it took a long time. By the time our first funding application was successful, we had actually submitted 12 applications. So you need to keep at it. You will be rejected. Keep at it, keep refining. And that's just the way it is. You keep applying, you keep pushing. And that's the nature of the beast. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Slindile, that resilience that Ton spoke about. Thank you. And with that, I want to thank all of you. If I can just sum up the session, I think as we are leaving, I think it was you, Asha, who spoke about you don't want to just take these things and try to to implement them as is, but you want to think about them as they apply to you. So I think as we think about the session and really most of this morning, what I would really encourage us to do is, as our speakers have been saying, be intentional. And that means taking the time to think about what it is that you want in the different areas of your life, because they're interconnected. Think about what it is that you want. Think about where your priorities are. Think about, what Tuan said to us, that where there is clarity, have clarity in the different areas of your life, have clarity of priorities, and then strategize about what do you need to do in this area. And then these tips that you've gotten and you will be getting throughout the rest of the day then begin to make sense, and you can tell which one you want to adapt to you, and which one you want to maybe put off. But at the end of the day, we all want to live whole lives, and have a wholesome life at the end of our lives, where we feel like we didn't cheat ourselves out of anything, but everything that we have sacrificed, we did so intentionally. Everything that we have accomplished, we really worked towards intentionally. So thank you so much, Slindile, Asha, Ton, thank you so much for that session. I can see also from the chat that our participants really appreciated all the contributions that were made. A lot of the messages are really just thanking you guys and appreciating the feedback, so I won't read them because of time. I'm going to hand back over to Bongiwe. Bongiwe, I hope you still think we are friends after I took up almost 20 minutes extra.
I'll have to reevaluate that, Mama Ponya. But thank you so much for the great.
Thank you.